The countdown is on to Donald Trump's so-called Liberation Day. In just 12 hours' time, the president will announce sweeping global tariffs on products imported to the United States. The announcement could affect trillions of dollars of U.S. imports, and there are fears that it could trigger a global trade war. Well, the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said that the EU was ready to retaliate to protect its interests, while Sir Keir Starmer has said that all options are on the table for the United Kingdom. The Trump administration insists that the policy will improve American competitiveness despite hefty criticism and widespread economic uncertainty.
Those days of America, beginning tomorrow, being ripped off are over. American workers and businesses will be put first under President Trump, just as he promised on the campaign trail. The president's historic action tomorrow will improve American competitiveness in every area of industry, reduce our massive trade deficits, and ultimately protect our economic and national security.
Well, President Trump has already imposed a range of tariffs that target key industries and major economies. The threat of new levies heightened tensions with some of America's historically closest trading partners, namely Canada and Mexico. Here's what the leaders of Canada and Mexico had to say about their countries' responses to the threat of fresh tariffs.
As I made clear to President Trump in our call last week, I will reject all attempts to weaken Canada, all attempts to wear us down, to break us down so that America can own us. That will never, ever happen.
We do not believe in an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, because that always leads to a bad situation. Of course, measures are taken in Mexico because measures are taken on the other side, but the dialogue has to continue.
So let's talk to Yanis Varoufakis, former Greek finance minister, also author. And sir, you were, of course, at the helm of Greece's negotiations during the economic crisis that was triggered by the 2008 financial crash. Is Liberation Day potentially going to trigger something as large as that 2008 financial crash?
A better analogy to 2008 is 1971, because this Trump shock, which we are all expecting with bated breath to hit us today, is not unprecedented. President Richard Nixon delivered the original shock in 1971 with very similar objectives. The objective of Nixon was to rein in the diminution of America's importance in the global economy, following the conversion of America from a trade surplus country to a trade deficit country. He essentially unleashed a major economic war against Europe and against Asia, Japan in that case, for the purposes of devaluing the American dollar, which he succeeded in doing. And, you know, everything that we have been experiencing in the last 30, 40, 50 years as the status quo was the result of that Nixon shock. So Trump is trying to create his own version of the Nixon shock. And I think we need to draw lessons from that. And allow me to say, because I was listening to your program, when I hear Ursula von der Leyen or the Canadian Prime Minister trying to outcompete Trump in terms of bravado, my message to them is, folks, when you're running a very large trade deficit, especially the European Union, $240 billion of a trade surplus, not deficit, with the United States, you cannot win a tariff war against Trump because you will run out of things to tariff before he does. So we better look inside our own economies for ways of changing our own economic model, given that he is trying to emulate Nixon and, blow up the prevailing monetary and trade system.
So that fighting talk from the EU, that arguably is not the right direction. We know that Sir Keir Starmer, the head of the leader of the UK, of course, is talking about not issuing retaliatory measures. Is that the way to go?
Well, it's one of the very rare occasions I agree with Keir Starmer on anything, but I think he's right on this, that the best retaliation is no retaliation when you are in the weaker position because you're running a surplus with the United States. What we should be doing in the United Kingdom, in the European Union, what China should be doing, we should all be looking at ways of rebalancing our own economies so that we do not rely on the American trade deficit for selling our net exports to the United States. Why can't we raise our own levels of investment and our own levels of aggregate demand within Europe, within the United Kingdom, within China, so that we don't need to rely on the trade deficit of the United States?
Is that realistic?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
I mean, yeah, doing it in-house, is that arguably realistic, given that so much is exported to the US? There's a reason for that. The markets work themselves out. So is it realistic to do it in-house?
There is nothing else which is realistic. Trump has declared it, and I believe that this is going to be a bipartisan position in the years to come. Whoever succeeds Donald Trump, we have to learn to live in a world where we can no longer export deflationary forces to the United States. I'm all for increasing trade, selling more, but we have to buy more, not just for the United States. This idea that, for instance, Germany had, that it can continue to piggyback on other people's demand in order to maintain a model, an industrial model, which is suppressing the living standards of the German middle class and working class, in order to continue to export massive quantities of stuff without importing equivalent amounts from its trading partners. This is a sure way of becoming dependent on capricious leaders like Donald Trump.
Yanis, let's just focus in on Greece. Obviously, you're Greece's former finance minister, and Greece is within the EU bloc. So Greece will be negotiating with the EU. We've heard what you think of Ursula von der Leyen's stance there. You historically said that the euro is like Hotel California, the song by the Eagles, a place you can check out, but you can never arguably leave. Greece is binded now with whatever the EU does. What's the future for Greece when it comes to this Liberation Day that we're expecting from Donald Trump?
It's not looking very good, I'm afraid, because Greece is not going to be affected directly by Trump's tariffs, because we don't sell that much to the United States. But Greece is utterly dependent, as a result of having turned into effectively a debt colony of the European Union over the last 20 years. It is utterly affected by the capacity of the German industrial model to continue functioning. And I'm afraid that the German industrial model has shown very sure signs recently that it is kaput, that it is gone. It is simply not able to compete with Chinese technologies, especially when it comes to electric vehicles, when it comes to green energy, because let's face it, in Germany and in Europe, we have not invested in the last 15 years. We had zero actual productive net investment. So